So, for a while now in academia, we've all acknowledged the elephant in the room, this huge pressure to adapt to a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous.
Right, but just pointing at it isn't getting us anywhere. Today, we're actually going to talk to it. We're shifting gears from just seeing the problem to diving headfirst into the tough, but absolutely necessary conversations we need to have.
So how do we even kick off a conversation this big? Well, we've laid out a path in 5 parts. First, we'll properly frame the tensions that this elephant really represents.
And then we'll get into the real nitty-gritty, how to move from silence to dialogue, how to handle the very real fear that change brings, what this all looks like in action, and finally, how to make this whole thing a part of our culture.
All right, let's set that stage. You know, the elephant isn't just about external pressures. It's really about the deep internal tug-of-war between the traditions that give academia its strength and the world's constant demand for change. Our institutions are caught right in the middle. And this is really where you feel the friction. The traditional academic mindset, which I still think is our foundation, is all about stability, proven structures, and most importantly, academic freedom. These aren't roadblocks, they're the very bedrock of what we do.
I hear you. They are foundational. But bedrock can also keep new things from growing. The innovator's view is that to stay relevant, that bedrock has to support something new, something that's agile, that actively looks for innovation, and that's led by people who can adapt. The world changed. We have to change too.
Which brings us to the million-dollar question. It's so easy to point out all the problems. You know, outdated classes, decision-making that moves at a snail's pace. But how do we actually go from complaining to having a real conversation? I mean, where do we even start?
I think it starts with a dose of intellectual honesty. We all have to admit, together, that no single group has all the answers. Not the faculty, not the administration, and not the students. A real dialogue can only begin when we all share that vulnerability of admitting, hey, I'm only seeing one part of this elephant.
That's a wonderful goal, but achieving that kind of vulnerability is incredibly hard in places built on hierarchy and expertise. It means we have to fundamentally change how we see one another.
And that's exactly why the old way, forming another committee that writes another formal report, just feels like we're going through the motions. It doesn't actually change the power structure.
Exactly! The shift has to be to something totally different. Think about inclusive listening forums. Real transformation isn't going to be dictated from an office on high. It starts when the conversation is a real exchange, with ideas coming from every corner of the university.
Of course, suggesting this kind of massive shift is, well, it's not easy. It stirs up a lot of anxiety, and frankly, that anxiety is understandable. We're not just talking about abstract policies here. This stuff touches on people's careers, their identities, their values. We have to acknowledge that fear is real.
And these fears are completely legitimate. You have faculty and staff worried about losing a professional identity they've spent their whole lives building. They're worried about their status, about academic freedom getting chipped away, and just a general deep uncertainty about what the future of their work even looks like.
And while those fears are 100% valid, we have to weigh them against a much, much bigger risk. The risk of doing nothing. The discomfort of a hard conversation, that's temporary. The danger of becoming irrelevant, that's permanent. We have to pick our discomfort.
So maybe the goal isn't to get rid of the discomfort. Maybe it's to reframe it, to build a culture where these tough conversations are seen as fuel for growth, not as a threat to who we are.
And that takes courage, real courage. Not just the courage to speak up, but the courage to really listen, even to things we don't want to hear, and still find a way to move forward together.
Okay, so let's get practical. We've talked theory, we've talked mindset, but what does talking to the elephant actually look like day to day at a university? What comes out of this dialogue?
It means weaving this dialogue right into how we operate. Imagine curriculum reviews that aren't just faculty talking to faculty, but that bring in people from industry, bring in recent grads. It means leadership stops asking, what do we need today, and starts asking, what will our students need to succeed 5 years from now?
And that third point is huge. Redefining our rewards. That is a serious challenge. How do we start to recognize and reward innovation and great collaborative teaching with the same weight that we give to traditional publications? Just having that conversation could change everything.
You know, when you connect all these dots, it's so clear this isn't about one big meeting or one-off project. The only way any of this actually works is if this kind of dialogue becomes part of the very fabric of the institution.
It has to be constant. It has to be embedded. It can't be something we do. It has to become part of who we are.
Which really brings us back to the main point. Knowing the elephant is there, well, that just opens the door. But you don't actually get anywhere by just standing there looking through the doorway.
Right. It's the ongoing, sometimes messy, but always courageous dialogue that actually pulls the entire institution through that door and toward real, meaningful change.
And talking to the elephant once isn't going to make it go away. Honestly, it might just make it mad. It only starts to back away when conversation becomes the default, the norm.
Exactly. Real, lasting change happens when dialogue isn't a special event on the calendar. It's just how business gets done. That is what it means to be truly VUCA ready.
In our next explainer, we're going to build on this and take it a step further. We'll be exploring the whole concept of academic agility. Yup, we're going to dive into what it really takes for an institution not just to survive in this crazy world, but to be adaptive, flexible, and resilient enough to actually lead the way. So, until then, we'll leave you with a question to think about. How can your institution start its own conversation with the elephant in the room?
Thanks for joining us.